In a rugged Viking village by the sea, a young warrior named Erik dreamt of becoming a chieftain. His father, the current leader, was a powerful man who had earned respect through countless battles. But Erik, eager to prove himself, felt that his time had come. He sharpened his axe, trained with his brothers, and listened closely to the tales of past heroes who had risen from nothing. Erik's ambition drove him every day. He felt the fire of leadership burning in his chest, knowing that the only way to honor his ancestors was to surpass them. His father's shadow loomed over him, but Erik was determined to carve his own path. The villagers often spoke of his courage, but they also doubted his strength, believing his youth was a weakness. One winter, a neighboring village was raided by a fierce clan. The warriors returned with stolen riches, and the cry for revenge echoed across Erik's village. His father, the chieftain, prepared to lead an attack, but his age made him wary of battle. Erik saw this as his chance and offered to lead the warriors into battle. His father hesitated, knowing the dangers, but he saw the fire in Erik's eyes. After a long pause, he agreed, giving Erik the chance he had been waiting for. The village gathered to bid the warriors farewell, their hopes resting on Erik's shoulders. The winds howled as they sailed toward the enemy, the tension palpable. Erik's forces landed on the shores of the enemy village, their axes raised high. The battle was brutal, with swords clashing and shields splintering. Erik fought with the fury of a storm. Each strike was filled with the strength of his ancestors. But as the battle raged on, Erik realized that his leadership was being tested. The men looked to him for guidance, and he could not falter. Despite the chaos, Erik kept his focus. He led with precision, giving orders and striking at the heart of the enemy's defenses. By the time the sun set, the enemy was defeated, and their riches were reclaimed. The warriors cheered, lifting Erik on their shoulders, but he knew that this victory was only the beginning. Back in his village, Erik was celebrated as a hero, but there were whispers of doubt. Some questioned whether he had truly earned his place as leader. The old warriors, who had fought alongside his father, remained loyal to the elder chieftain. Erik felt the weight of their judgment, but he also understood that he had to prove himself further. Determined to win their respect, Erik called a council of elders and warriors. He spoke not with pride, but with humility, promising to lead with the wisdom of his father and the strength of his own heart. The elders were skeptical, but they saw the fire in his eyes and the respect he commanded from the younger warriors. It was a small victory, but it was one step closer to what Erik wanted. Weeks after the raid, strange reports began to surface of an even larger threat coming from the north. The enemy clan, now regrouped, was preparing for a larger assault. Erik's father, frail and weakened by age, struggled to keep the village secure. Erik knew that he would have to act fast to protect his people. As Erik gathered his warriors, he realized that this battle would not be fought in the same way. He needed to outthink the enemy, to plan every move carefully. The warriors were ready for the fight, but Erik had to ensure that his leadership would be tested in new ways. The village had always relied on brute strength, but Erik understood that strategy and cunning were just as important. Erik gathered his closest advisors and warriors to devise a plan. He knew that a direct attack would be too risky. They needed to use the land to their advantage. The village was surrounded by dense forests, perfect for ambushes and surprise attacks. Erik ordered the men to create hidden traps and to hide their numbers from the enemy, using the natural terrain to make their strikes deadly. The warriors were impressed by Erik's insight. They could see that he was more than just a fighter. He was a leader who understood the art of war. When the enemy finally arrived, they found themselves walking into a trap. Erik's strategy had worked, and the enemy was overwhelmed. The victory was decisive, but Erik knew that his enemies would not stop easily. As Erik's fame grew, so did the pressure of leadership. The warriors trusted him, but they also expected him to deliver victories. Every day, Erik felt the weight of his responsibility. He spent countless hours in council, making decisions that would shape the future of his village. Some decisions were easy, but others were painful. like deciding who would lead the raids or how to distribute the spoils of war. Despite the burden, Erik never wavered in his commitment to his people. He put their needs above his own, often sacrificing his personal desires for the good of the village. But as time went on, Erik began to feel isolated. Leadership had its rewards, but it also came with a loneliness that he couldn't shake. One night, as Erik sat in the longhouse with his closest allies, a messenger arrived with disturbing news. One of his trusted warriors had betrayed the village, offering information to a rival clan. Erik was torn between justice and the bond he had shared with this warrior. The betrayal cut deep, and Erik knew that he had to act swiftly. In a tense confrontation, Erik faced the traitor. With a heavy heart, he delivered justice, knowing that a leader's duty was to protect his people, no matter the cost. The village mourned the loss, but Erik's decision was understood. He had proven that loyalty to the village was more important than personal connections. Erik's victories had gained the attention of other chieftains, some of whom feared his rising power. A challenger from the north, Jorund, came to Erik's village with a boastful declaration. He would defeat Erik and claim his land. The challenge was accepted, and a great duel was set for the coming days. Erik knew that this would be the test of his strength and leadership. The night before the duel, Erik reflected on his journey. He had fought to prove himself worthy, but now he realized that true strength came from within. He had learned from his battles, his victories, and his losses. He didn't need to fight for honor anymore. He fought for the future of his people. The morning of the duel arrived, and the two warriors stood face to face on the cold, windswept plains. Jorund was massive, with muscles like boulders and an intimidating glare. But Erik's determination was unshakable. They fought fiercely, their axes ringing through the air, but Erik's speed and strategy outmatched Jorund's brute strength. After a long battle, Erik struck the final blow, and Jorund fell to the ground. The villagers erupted in cheers, but Erik's heart was heavy. He had won the duel, but he knew that the true challenge was not in defeating his enemies, but in leading his people with wisdom and courage. After the duel, Erik extended an olive branch to Jorund's followers, offering them peace instead of war. He knew that his true victory lay in uniting the clans, not in further bloodshed. Some accepted his offer, while others refused. But Erik's reputation as a just leader spread across the land, and many came to see him not only as a warrior but as a peacemaker. Erik's father, now too old to lead, stepped down as chieftain, passing the mantle to Erik. The villagers gathered in the longhouse, celebrating the rise of their new leader. Erik looked out over the crowd, proud of the path he had taken, and vowed to lead with wisdom, courage, and compassion. As Erik's rule began, he forged alliances with neighboring clans to strengthen his position. One such alliance came from an unexpected source, a clan led by a woman, Astrid, who had earned respect for her wisdom and bravery. Erik and Astrid formed a bond based on mutual respect, recognizing that together they could face any threat. Together, they built a powerful coalition that brought prosperity to the land. Their combined forces were unmatched, and their leadership became a symbol of strength and unity. Erik realized that leadership was not just about wielding a sword, but about building alliances and understanding the hearts of others. Despite the peace Erik had worked to build, there were still factions that sought to undermine him. One day, a rival chieftain accused Erik of breaking a sacred vow. The accusation was a test of Erik's honor. He knew that his people's faith in him was fragile, and that a single mistake could undo everything he had built. Erik called a council of the elders to discuss the matter, and after careful deliberation, it was determined that the accusation was false. Erik's reputation was upheld, but the test had taught him an important lesson, that honor must be defended not just through strength, but through wisdom and transparency. As years passed, Erik's leadership was remembered as one of the greatest in Viking history. He had led his people through wars, betrayals, and peace, earning the title of chieftain by not only his bloodline but by the strength of his character. The stories of his rise, from a young warrior seeking honor to a wise leader uniting clans, were told around campfires for generations. Erik's legacy was not just in the battles he won, but in the way he ruled with compassion, wisdom, and a sense of duty. He had proved that true leadership is earned through deeds, not titles. And when his time came to pass the torch, he did so with the knowledge that his people would continue to thrive, guided by the lessons he had taught them. Erik's final battle was not against an enemy, but against time itself. As old age began to take its toll, Erik knew that the time had come for him to step aside. But before he did, he led one last raid to protect his people from a looming threat. His final act was one of courage, as he fought valiantly to the end, securing his village's future. When he passed, his legacy lived on. His people remembered the chieftain who had risen from nothing, fought with honor, and led with wisdom. Erik had proven that true strength was not in the blood that ran through his veins, but in the heart that guided his actions. Moral of the story: leadership is not just about strength. It's about wisdom, compassion, and the ability to unite others for a common cause. True leaders rise through challenges, earn respect, and leave a legacy of honor and unity.